you. It's such an honor to be up here today. I'm Marnie, and I'm a believer in recovery from sexual addiction. Hi. My path to recovery started here at Saddleback Church in November of 2000. I remember that night well. I crawled in broken and completely unaware of reality. My view on life had become so distorted, and my actions had become so out of control, I don't think the enemy himself could have kept up. That night, I watched as people were smiling, hugging, and celebrating because it happened to be the 10th anniversary of Celebrate Recovery. I arrived an hour early, completely unaware the worship service didn't start until 7 o'clock. So I sat in tent 3 and I listened to the band rehearse. I remember sitting there, all alone, the tent completely empty, with only a handful of people walking around setting things up. As I looked around the big empty tent, tears began streaming down my face. I didn't know what I was doing there. Everything within me just wanted to get up and walk out. It was evident I was still in denial. I kept hearing the same thoughts repeating themselves in my head, like, whatever is wrong with these people is way worse than anything I could have done. Yeah. And whatever I've done, I'm sure I can fix it on my own. As these thoughts were rambling loudly through my head, I could hear the worship music playing faintly in the background. But for some reason, I just could not bring myself to get up out of that chair and leave. I was startled as a man came up to me, put his hand on my shoulder, and said, "Excuse me, but the seat is taken." And I thought to myself, now that's weird. This whole tent is empty, and here's a strange man telling me that my seat's taken. It took me a while to recognize that he was kidding, but just in those few words, yeah. But just in those few words, I felt a sense of comfort and relief. I felt welcomed and a little less out of place. That night, I attended Newcomers Class 101, where for the first time I confessed my secrets. Out of the 10 women who were there that night, not one of them shared about an addiction. Trembling, I was the last one to share, and I felt completely out of my element. I managed to utter the words that had gone unspoken for years. I cheated on my husband. And moments after that, I began to sob. That was it. That was all I said. The woman who was leading 101 that night leaned forward, cupped my hands into hers, and told me for the first time that everything was going to be okay and that I'd come to the right place. Long before I was born, there was already turmoil brewing in my family. Before my first birthday, my parents had finalized their plan to divorce for issues unbeknownst to me. My sister and I were sent to live with my father and grandparents in Hawaii. Once we arrived, my dad conveniently left the scene. My grandparents were unofficially assigned to care for us as if we were their own children. My fondest childhood memories are of the years I spent with my grandparents in Hawaii. They taught me about Jesus, and by their example, I learned Christian values. Thankfully, they showed me what it was like to live in a normal family. My parents, on the other hand, were diabolical opposites of my grandparents. My father is a functioning alcoholic who also has a wandering eye for women. I watched my dad move from relationship to relationship and watched as his addiction to pornography and alcohol grew. Curiosity took me by surprise one day when I was snooping around the house and found my dad's Playboy collection hidden in his dresser drawers. I felt as though I had just stumbled upon a secret, and I ran out of the room. Often, my dad would take my sister and I over to his girlfriend's house. We were abandoned in the front room and told to watch television, while Dad retreated into the bedroom with his girlfriend. Even at such a young age, I was well aware of what they were doing. I viewed this as a totally acceptable lifestyle. Yeah, it was dysfunction at its finest. My mother, who I refer to as Edie, is a little more difficult for me to talk about. She has the personality of a bipolar, raging alcoholic, minus the alcohol. Mommy Dearest comes to mind. She was physically, verbally, and emotionally abusive. As a young child, I can remember being woken up from a dead sleep in the middle of the night to her yelling and screaming about why the bathroom wasn't clean. I remember one day the car broke down. Edie forced me to walk home 30 miles, listening to her instruct me that I was to walk ahead of her, and if she caught up to me, she would kick me. Whenever I had a special event to go to, like a birthday party or a school dance, she would create some sort of debacle the night before to ruin any chance of me going. On one occasion, I was getting ready to walk out the door to a friend's birthday party when Edie erupted into one of her fits of rage. She opened up all the kitchen cabinets and threw all of the dishes on the floor, shattering them into a million pieces. She told me that I had to clean it up if I wanted to go to the birthday party. An incident that sticks with me the most was when I was getting ready to go on a camping trip. Edie slapped me in the face so hard that my tooth punctured my lip and pierced the skin. Needless to say, I had a huge fat lip the following day. I told everyone that I had been eating and that my fork had slipped, but everyone knew the truth. Throughout my childhood, I became Edie's human piñata. Being choked and dodging mirrors were episodes that happened on a regular basis. I was beaten with inanimate objects like lamps, hangers, high-heeled shoes, and whatever else was at hand's reach. To cope, I escaped into a fantasy life filled with lustful thoughts and pornographic images that were embedded into my mind. I would stay in bed for hours, fantasizing about sexual acts, replaying the same dreams over and over and over again in my head. I can't possibly take the time to tell you about all of the cruelty and torturous abuse I endured. Let me just assure you that I've only scratched the surface and shared a fraction of it with you. My parents are complete strangers to me now. At the age of 17, just before the start of my senior year of high school, I emancipated myself. Legally, I was recognized as an adult. When I finally broke away, I was determined to break the cycle of the insanity I had been living with all my life. But it turns out I became a product of my environment. The summer after my senior year of high school, I broke up with my longtime boyfriend and moved back to Hawaii. A couple months later, I moved back to California, and I had a plan. I was going to go to college. I enrolled at the local community college, got my AA degree, and then went on to get my bachelor's. Shortly after my return from Hawaii, I rekindled my relationship with my high school sweetheart, and in June of 1998, we were married. Marriage started off difficult for us. Although we had dated for 8 years prior to getting married, it almost seemed that in an instant we had grown miles apart. Hard times were beginning to materialize. We were struggling financially, and we were living with his parents. I became the breadwinner in the family. I would wake up every morning and get ready for work while the rest of the family slept in. As a newlywed, there were so many things I had wished for, but bitterness, resentment, and hatred started to paint an ugly picture as visions of finally a normal lifestyle had fallen by the wayside. We went through months and months of arguing, physical abuse, and a lot of broken promises. I felt like I was running in place. I felt taken advantage of, disrespected, and unappreciated. I felt like I had no voice. I felt like I had been robbed of my dreams, and most of all, I was starving emotionally. It was then that my behavior exploded into an uncontrollable fury. My solution, adultery. Just 10 short months into my marriage, I had an affair. In my denial, life never felt so good. I was getting the attention from men I hardly knew and who hardly knew me. Every day, I became more and more independent of my marriage. I felt in control. I was finally doing something I thought I wanted to do instead of having to live by someone else's rules. But in my heart, I knew something was wrong. I ignored those feelings and instead replaced them with fantasy and lust. My forbidden lifestyle progressed into a double life. Depending on the situation, I began wearing different masks at different functions. At work, I was balanced, poised, and professional. I would walk in the door with a smile on my face, walk into my office, shut the door, and act out with internet pornography in chat rooms. On the opposite end of the spectrum, when I was with my college friends, I was the baby. I played the innocent, codependent Marnie. But the real Marnie, the uninhibited Marnie, surfaced after work hours, where I would spend most of my free time at the bars with the good old boys club. I could tell a good dirty joke or two and just be one of the guys. The more I drank, the more I talked. The more I talked, the more I started blaming my circumstances for acting out. This is where my anorexia started to take shape. Starving myself made me feel like I was making my own decisions. I decided what I put in my body. I decided what I would look like. That same year, I decided to participate in the LA Marathon. I ended up loving it so much that the following year, while I was still in my addictions, I started my training regimen all over again in order to recompete and try and beat my time from the previous year. I started working out obsessively. I was running between 12 and 15 miles a day, eating only about a handful of grapes each day, and drinking excessive amounts of Diet Coke. Body image became of great importance. I was now on the quest for the perfect figure, no matter what the cost. This lifestyle, coupled with my sexual addiction, left my body weak and out of fuel. I weighed a mere 92 pounds, and I learned that I had contracted an STD. I was rapidly self-destructing. Desperate and confused, I picked up the phone and called Saddleback Church. I spoke with one of the lay counselors there, giving her a fake name, telling her what awful shape my marriage was in. I was convinced that if she had heard the awful truth of what my life was like at home, she would surely give me permission to divorce my husband. But she didn't. So, a couple days later, I called back to get a different person. This person wouldn't side with me either. I thought to myself, are these people not hearing me? I began cataloging reasons why I should just give up at this point, but I didn't. About the third or fourth time I called, I got someone who finally got it. She heard my plea for help. She told me that she understood how I felt. She even shared a little bit of her pains with me and suggested I try this ministry out called Celebrate Recovery. It took me about 2 months to take her advice. During that time, I recalled the Christian values that were taught to me as a child, which I had buried due to my anger and resentment towards God. He had finally gotten my attention. It was then that I realized I don't understand myself at all, for I really want to do what is right, but I can't. I do what I don't want to, what I hate. I know perfectly well that what I'm doing is wrong, and my bad conscience proves that I agree with these laws I am breaking, but I can't help myself because I'm no longer doing it. It is the sin inside me that is stronger than I am that makes me do these evil things. The pain had finally become greater than the fear. I had reached my bottom. 2 months later, after that first fateful night at Celebrate Recovery, a women's step study opened, focusing solely on women's sexual addiction. So I picked up a set of Celebrate Recovery workbooks and a Life Recovery Bible and began working through the 12 steps with women I could relate to and who could also relate to me. I started to grasp that this internal battle I was having was not uncommon. It was then that I started to understand how the pains of my past had played such a significant part in my acting out. I started realizing that I was in a cycle of addiction, that all my life I viewed men as objects, and I was imitating what I had learned in my childhood, that I had kept so many secrets. Childhood secrets, secrets in my adult life, and secrets in my marriage, and that by saying them out loud, it took the power out of them. More significantly, thank you. Thank you. More significantly, I saw just how far I had fallen in my relationship with Christ. That problems far too big for me to solve are piled higher than my head. Meanwhile, my sins, too many to count, have all caught up with me, and I am ashamed to look up. It was after working Principle 4, where I openly examined and confessed my faults to myself, to God, and to someone I trust, that true healing began. Happy are the pure in heart. It was then that I heard God's promise of freedom and stopped acting out. It was then that I realized that whatever is covered up will be uncovered, and every secret will be made known. So then whatever you have said in the dark will be heard in broad daylight. As I laid my sins at the foot of the cross and turned from my addictions, God declared you not guilty. He blotted out the charges proved against you, the list of his commandments which you had not obeyed. He took this list of sins and destroyed it by nailing it to Christ's cross. I continued to work the biblical principles of my program. The following year, I decided I was in need of another 12-step study group. This time, I was asked to help co-lead. That year, I began to co-lead the women's sexual addiction group on Friday nights and began to sponsor other women who struggled with female sexual addiction. I was able to minister to these women as they shared their fifth step. This took my recovery to another level. My third year in recovery was a pivotal year for me. I started my own step study, completely unconfident of my ability to lead. I willingly surrendered all that I was and all that I had become, and remembered, in his heart, a man plans his course, but the Lord determines his steps. Today, I do not have one single male friend who I do not consider a brother in Christ. When I walk into a room, I don't look to see if men are looking at me. Instead, I look instantly for my girlfriends. I've reconciled my relationship with my husband, and today my relationships are built on honesty and trust. Thank you. Thank you. I can't describe what an impact that first night at Celebrate Recovery had on me. In fact, few people here at Celebrate Recovery know what an impact this ministry has had on my life. Some people sitting here today probably don't even realize how instrumental they've been in my recovery. That man who put his hand on my shoulder that first night was CJ. For everyone who knows CJ, yeah. The woman who embraced me in Newcomers Class 101 was Brenda. The lay counselor who suggested that I try Celebrate Recovery was Lisa. It was their random acts of kindness and their service to this ministry that laid the stepping stones to my healing and my recovery. I have made so many friends over these past 3 years, true friends. They challenge my heart to speak in the greatest ways. They take the time to listen so intently and capture my true feelings. They look past the words and deep into the heart. I'd also like to express my gratitude to my husband that through the years, we have helped mold each other into the individuals we are today, guiding each other through the delicate petals of life. Thank you for all that you are. And to Tina, my sponsor. Although you started off as just my sponsor, our friendship has flourished into something that is far bigger than I am and more than I could ever imagine. I love our countless parking lot chats and our trips to Denny's. You have guided my steps and truly become my strength. You have shaped and molded me into the person I am today. You know, there was a time when I wouldn't admit what a sinner I was, but my dishonesty made me miserable and filled my days with frustration. All day and all night, your hand was heavy on me. My strength evaporated like water on a sunny day until I finally admitted my sins to you and stopped trying to hide them. I said to myself, I will confess them to the Lord, and you forgave me. All my guilt is gone. Come, let us talk this over, says the Lord. No matter how deep the stain of your sins, I can take it out and make you as clean as freshly fallen snow. Even if you are stained as crimson, I can make you as white as wool. Thank you for letting me share.